Okay, we are recording.
Great.
You may
Hi.
proceed. Hi.
So it's really great to both meet new folks and also see some really wonderful familiar faces. You all probably have met Joel because he's been able to join Shir so far, but I haven't met all of you. So I'm Shani. I've been in this Shir for a couple of years now, and we did the previous iteration of Yoredea with Rev Landis and Rev Nachum. And it's really fun to get to jump back into these sugyot. This is my, I think, third or fourth time going through them. You'll see if they strike you as complicated, it's not you. And the more times you turn them over and turn them over, I think the more you'll realize what you didn't know. You'll come to know what you didn't know. And so this has been an exciting opportunity for us to get to do these, to prepare these together again and get to teach them to you. Joel, any other words of introduction before I dive into the first sugya?
No, I'm going to be smart and be silent for the moment.
Yeah, so just I know, Joel and I are co-teaching this this shiur. I'm going to largely do the first big chunk of the sugya, and Joel's going to do the next big chunk. But we are chavrut; we will interrupt each other and remind each other and help each other out. So just to, I'm going to do what I shouldn't do, which is start with an apology, which is there's extremely loud yard work happening right outside my window. So if I'm a little distracted, that is why, and we're going to do my best. Can folks hear me okay? Great, awesome. So far, the sugyot that this year has looked at has been focusing on the question, how does bittul work? Meaning, when a little piece of isser or a little drop of isser drops into my mixture, what conditions need to be there such that I can ignore it, that it's effectively not there. What we're about to move into is a sugya that discusses basically a situation in which bittul doesn't work ever. And there are basically a handful of these scenarios in which no matter how much of the heter you have present, bittul isn't going to work. So that's largely what we're going to focus on in the first half of the sugya. And one more sort of framing before we get into the text itself is we want to talk about the concept. Has the concept of yavish v'yavish or lach belach? Give me a thumbs up if that sounds familiar and a thumbs down if you have no idea what I'm saying. Good, so it's come, okay, and Yavni is a little, great. So just someone who feels familiar with those terms, either from this context or another, want to just give a brief, what's lach v'lach, what's yavish v'yavish when we're talking about it in the context of Isser v'Heter? Be brave. You're allowed to be wrong.
Looks like Yavni has something to say, so I'm just going to call on him.
Yavni went so-so. He's going to try it out.
Me? From the meaning, I would guess lach belach is wet things in wet things. So it's, which like you think of as things that like really mix in a serious way, as opposed to yavish which is dry things, which like in theory could be separated again, but maybe not practically.
Good, excellent. So yavish v'yavish, generally we're talking about, like you said, things that are separable, and I'm using the terms here that I learned from Daniel Reisman, which I found really helpful. Separable but indistinguishable, meaning I have 4 pieces of meat. They all look exactly the same. One of them is isser, the others are heter. What do I do? So I could technically take the isser out, and if I could, all the other ones would be okay. That's yavish v'yavish. Lach belach is like electrons, says Joel. I don't get it, but some of you probably will, which is why both our brains are involved in this here. Lach belach tends to be liquid mixtures. So I pour my isser wine into my heter wine. They're inseparable. I can't take one out from the other. They're also indistinguishable, just like our yavish case. And there we're going to deal with a question of what's the proportion. generally speaking, when we're talking about yavesh v'yavesh, we're talking about min b'mino. Raise thumbs up if min b'mino sounds like a familiar category. Good. So generally speaking, min b'mino tends to correlate with yavesh v'yavesh. Generally speaking, min b'she'eno mino often correlates with lach balach because, although not always, I just gave you the wine example, which is min b'mino, but roughly speaking. Okay, so that's just some general framing for where we're going. So with that framing, someone want to read me the Mishnah, and this is the Mishnah on Hullin Kuf Amud Bet that starts with Gida Nashesh and actually it starts earlier. Sorry, it doesn't start on that daf. It starts a little earlier, but we've got it at the beginning of the source sheet, which Joel has linked in the chat, and I'm going to link again for those who just got here.
If you're looking in Vilna printing, it's Tzadi Vav Amud Bet is where the Mishnah is, and it's also on the top of that source sheet that I shared in the chat.
Maybe you want to share a screen.
Can we do that if we're not hosting? I'm not sure.
Yes, you can.
Oh yeah, I can. Here.
I think I'd rather for now not, if folks can look in the Google Doc, because then we can see each other. We may share a screen for to be able to use the whiteboard, although I have a physical whiteboard with me just in case. Anyone want to jump in and read the Mishnah?
I'll read.
Go for it, Asher.
All right. גיד הנשר שנתבשל עם הגידים בזמן גיד הנשר שנתבשל עם הגידים בזמן שמכירו בנותן טעם, ואם לאו כולן אסורים, והרוטב בנותן טעם. So if you have a גיד הנשר, which is one of the only mitzvot we have from Sefer Breshit not to eat, and it's been cooked with other gidim that are acceptable to eat.
Mm-hmm.
If
the
you
gid?
notice,
Translate
gid
gid
is,
into English.
I guess a sinu.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I'm
Also
so used
known
to
as
talking about it
appendix.
in Hebrew, I forgot what it's called in English, but I think that's
Just
right.
so we make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I'm not sure why somebody would want to eat a sinu anyway, but some people do. So if you notice, if you recognize that it's been cooked together, let me word this properly. Okay, the gid nasher that's been cooked with other gidim. At the time that you recognize, that you realize that it's been cooked together, if it's noten tam, then it's forbidden. You can't eat it.
What
And
is if it's noten tam mean?
If the tam, and this is what we've already gone through already, if the taste of this gid hanasheh can be discerned within the other things that it's been cooked amongst,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't eat it. But if it's not, no wait, that doesn't make sense.
Bizman shemakiro. What does that
If
mean?
it's much makiro, when you realize that you've put in this gid hanasheh along with the other gidim.
Pause. Someone else give that a try. What does bizman shemakiro mean? Go ahead, Elizabeth. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you. If it's a time when it is still recognizable as an individual or like as a distinctive sinu as opposed to, I guess, if they've turned into mush.
Good. So if
Okay.
I can
I'll buy that.
if I can still see the gid hanasheh, the iser sinew, right? If I can still see the iser, meaning what?
It hasn't really cooked yet. It hasn't really cooked that much. It's still relatively early in the process.
Okay,
could still
good.
take
We'll
it
come
out.
back to early in the process. More importantly, as I think Yavni just said, you can take it out. I can still take it out. So in such a case where I can still see the Isser one, binotem tam. Now, Asher, what does that mean?
Then if the other gidim in there can have sort of absorbed the flavor or the taste, if somebody tasting it would be able to discern, oh, I noticed this one, and then we've already gone through the whole, who do you find out, who do you get to taste it just in case, then you can't, then the whole thing is asur. You can't eat it.
Okay.
No,
So,
that doesn't make sense. Logically, it doesn't make sense.
Then we're playing the game of benoten tam. If you can see the gid, then we're in terms of noten tam, meaning does this mixture have tam of that gid? But by the way, what's already confusing about this? What questions do you already have about this scenario? Anyone can chime in here.
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't
What
hear.
questions do you already have here? Is everything totally clear, or is there something unclear? There's a reason Asher is struggling a little bit
I think
explain the details.
I've unstruggled myself.
Well,
that doesn't make
Don't
sense.
unstruggle yet. Ask the question. Ask the question.
Okay. No, the question is, what's the Mishnah saying? Is the Mishnah saying it's mutar or asur, which is what I was struggling with. And I think what it's saying is that if it's no tain tam, then everything in there is asur.
Well, so,
I mean,
yeah,
if it's not
benoten tam. So
right.
One of the questions is, what is asur benoten tam?
Everything else that was in the pot with it.
So you've suggested an answer, but don't suggest an answer yet.
Okay. Oh.
Don't be so quick to know exactly what the Mishnah is saying. This is a complex message. So our first question is, what is asur benoten tam? Okay, the im lav, meaning if you don't recognize the gid, then what?
If you don't recognize the gid, that means it's all indiscernible and all the gidim are together, then everything in the pot is asur to eat. You can't eat any of it.
Kulan asurin. What are kulan?
Everything in the pot, all of the gidim in the pot.
All of the gidim, okay, are asur. And the
probably
rotev,
anything else in the pot. And the rotev, only if the rotev has the taste of it.
So the rotev is only asur if you can taste it, right? If there's nitinatam, which you've talked about, either that means you can actually taste it, or there's not a ratio of 61 to 1.
Is that point made clear in the Mishnah? That point, it sounds right, but is
the
it made clear?
benoten tam, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So
okay.
One of the sources of why this is so confusing, remember I just gave you the categories of lach v'lach and yavesh v'yavesh? What's this one? It's a trick question.
It's yavesh belach. It's yavesh beyavesh belach.
Yafeh. Right? It's, or as we're going to see in the Gemara, min vimino v'davar acher is another way of saying that. Okay? So the reason this situation gets its own Mishnah and is so complicated is because it's not clearly min vimino. It's not clearly lach v'lach, which would be, we would evaluate based on what ratio? Right, sorry, yavesh v'yavesh. Not min vimino, we evaluate based on what ratio? How do we get to bittul?
Usually, I mean, I'll jump in. Usually berov, but it's not, but also
That's
maybe.
also not clear.
Yeah, not
but
clear.
Presuming min vimino can be batel, we evaluate that based on rov. Min b'she'eno mino, i.e. lach v'lach, how do we evaluate it? If not barov, then we've done this already?
Yeah.
B'shishim, yafeh. Okay, so we don't know which one this is. And because we don't know which one this is, the situation needs very, very careful attention. We've already seen the factors we have is makiro or eno makiro, and we're both evaluating, under what circumstances can I eat these gidim, and under what circumstances can I eat the rotev in the mixture. What's the rotev? Go ahead, Yavni. Oh, you froze just as I called on you. Someone else has to save him.
It's the broth, isn't it? Like the broth that's cooked in.
Broth, or probably like the juices coming out of the gidim, like gravy.
I'm going to jump in. I saw Khatam Sofer just like a few minutes ago I was looking at, where he actually suggested that there's also water mixed in with the rotev. It's not just the
which would suggest broth, like Asher said. But it's also an open question, right? What's this rotev? Does it come just from the meat that's in there? Is it something else you added? Rashi is also going to use water. Okay, so these are already sort of the layers of complexity happening in this Mishnah so far. Someone want to take over the second half of the Mishnah from B'chein Chaticha?
I have a question. Do we know what a gid is?
Yeah, we spoke about that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't actually know what it is. I just know that it's the thing you can't eat that goes down the leg of the animal. But
we watched that really gross video at the beginning of Shir last year.
That's fair. I only know the word sinew because I know the word gid. It's one of those like suet and chalev, you know, it's
I was asking if gid in general, not gid in Russia. Gid in general is just a cut of meat.
It's a sinew.
It's a sinew.
yeah, which is I mean, we've seen this, right? One of the major problems with it. I don't think that sinews themselves really seem to have taste to them, but
That might complicate things too.
yeah.
But we're not going to spend so much time on the Gita Nasha today. Okay, so someone read for me second half of the Mishnah. I'm very resilient to Zoom silence.
We could probably
I'll
make
read
it
if you want.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's from וכן חתיכה, לא? וכן חתיכה של נבלה וכן חתיכה של דג טמא שנתבשלו עם החתיכות בזמן שמכירן בנותן טעם, ואם לאו כולן אסורות, והרוטב בנותן טעם.
Okay. Tell me what we learned.
So with a piece of meat from a nevela and a piece of dag tameh that are cooked together with other allowed pieces of meat or of dag that is allowed, then if it's still the forbidden piece is recognizable, then it is forbidden when this piece already gave flavor to the other pieces. And
so the other pieces is already making an assumption, but okay.
Okay. If it transferred tam, and if not, if it's not recognizable, I imagine, then all of the pieces are forbidden. And the rotev is also forbidden when it has the flavor.
Okay, so summarize that for me. What did we learn all together in this Mishnah? Say it in normal people words.
Gidanashe and piece of meat, they have to transfer their flavor and then they make everything asur. But if you recognize them and you take them away before they transfer the flavor, then it's okay.
And what if I didn't recognize it and take it away?
Then everything is forbidden because you don't know which one is which. Because it's me and maybe no.
Sorry, say again.
You wouldn't know which one is which.
Right.
So then everything is forbidden because it's me and maybe no.
Right. So remember going through, we've got the rotev and we've got the pieces. So the pieces are going to be dependent right now, at least on the face value in the Mishnah, the pieces are going to be dependent on whether I took that piece out. And the rotev is going to be dependent on netilat tam. Anyone have any questions on this Mishnah so far?
I want to just sharpen that one piece about that because it's mim b'mino, they're all kulan asurot if in amaki ro.
I haven't said that.
I think Andre said that. You said that, right? Or did I misunderstand that?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to push back on that. Like, I want to leave that hanging as to why it is that they're kulan asurot at that point. It's not mashma to me that that's the reason. Maybe it is. If it is to you, please explain. Or to anybody.
Mashma, yeah, but basically, I think, Andres, you're filling that piece in is basically, I want to back up and find the question. What's the question to which, because they're all min b'mino, is the answer?
So why would they be all asur if it's not recognizable?
Good, which is going to be the first question of the Gemara. It is not obvious why, if you couldn't take that gid out or if you couldn't take that piece of meat out, it's not obvious why we couldn't just say, wait, but don't we have this concept of bitul berov? It should just be batel berov. So the first half of this sugya is going to be dealing with that question.
Okay. I have a question though. How do you know that you took the piece out? Is that written in the Mishnah?
It is not written in the Mishnah.
So why are we saying that?
That feels implied like the makiro though? Like why would it seems a little crazy to say, oh, you recognize it and then you just leave it there. Like I think that's part of the significance of like you recognize the pieces and then you can remove it from whatever the mixture is.
Well, I mean,
so is the reason why makiro? It's not because is it because it turned into juice and therefore you can't get it out? What if you just fell in a minute ago and you still know which one it is? It's a lot larger than the other one, so you know which one it is. Not because, in other words, as opposed
so
to...
then you take it out, as in you
Right.
recognize it, and then you take it out of the thing, because like you wouldn't be like, oh, that's an Isser thing. I guess I'll just keep cooking it with
Exactly.
my other like permitted.
So you're saying from the fact that the Mishnah is saying anything about makiro, it's implying that why is that a factor? Because obviously it's an actionable observation. You take action on it. You're gonna remove it, and even so, and in such a case, you still have to have another requirement. So there's actually two requirements. You have to have that it doesn't give flavor and that you've removed it, and then the thing will be mutter. There's actually two requirements. I mean, it's obvious.
No, I'm not sure that you have to have actually removed it. Usually, that thing is not allowed, but it doesn't mean if you leave it in there cooking, but you can still recognize between them, you can still eat the other ones and maybe the broth if it doesn't give taste.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting point.
But Yavni, then why didn't you remove it?
I'm just saying.
You're a guest. You're a guest at somebody else's house, and he's not Jewish, and maybe he wants to eat that.
I could see that as a logical
possibility.
I think there isn't. Yes, this is always b'diavad. That's
right.
worth
The
mentioning.
minute you recognize it, it's not like then it wouldn't be okay. You can't leave it even if it doesn't give tam because now it's l'chachila that you actually have something issue that you're trying to eat. So
right.
You have awareness.
You certainly can't eat it. You certainly can't eat it.
Yeah,
you're proposing maybe you could leave it there for whatever reason.
In order not to offend your host.
Although you could have a problem. You could have a problem because as you start removing the other food, it might start to give flavor. The ratios might change.
Yeah, I mean, a ghee itself, or it could be fully cooked and now it's cooling down when you're eating it. But also, I can imagine you saying like the real issue is you can't eat the isur. It hasn't given time to anything. You can't eat the isur, and that's the problem. So if makiro may not be melted in the thing. It may just be, you don't know which piece is the isur, which is actually kind of the Rashi there. Right, and the problem is eating the isur, and if you can recognize it and eat around it, and it's not giving flavor or anything, doesn't sound ideal in my world, but it could be that there's no problem. With that.
What you're suggesting is a nice point. You're saying if I know that I don't know which one it is, and I know there's 10 giddim there, but I'll eat the potatoes, and the potatoes don't taste like the giddim, then it should be fine. Theoretically, I mean, I could go one step further. Take out all 10 giddim, and then the broth is with. I have another question. What if it's totally minam? People were suggesting that you not makir it because it's dissolved. If it dissolved completely to the point where it's just it's indistinguishable. It's all broth. It became all broth. Now would the din still be that it's usser even if it's not noten tam? In other words, we said that if you eno makiro, I don't recognize it. It's so dissolved. It's totally dissolved. I don't recognize it. So it's all aser.
Kulan asurim.
Kulan asurim. Are you going to say in that case it's aser or mutter?
Well, I also don't think this is talking about it being dissolved though, and it's eno makiro. Like these feel like, especially with what we get like early on in the Gemara, it feels like these are pieces of things. I think it's more just that it got mixed up with other things that look like it, and you don't remember which one is which. Not that it like dissolves into mixture, you just can't pick it out from the others.
I'm just saying, theoretically, if it would have totally dissolved, if the company came with a blender and blended it up into mush, and it's all the same thing, would it be kulan asur?
I want to suggest that there is a lane of thinking, particularly when we get into the question of what's mamash and what's not mamash, that would, I think, take us in that direction to answer that question. I'm going to suggest, for the sake of time, because we have a lot of material to cover, that we not go down that thought experiment, because this sugya is not going to answer that question. Because this sugya,
no, I think it is actually.
It seems like all the.
Okay. I think we are going to get the answer to that question, but maybe. But let's go. We can go on.
Okay.
But I think
we don't get to it, you think it's
right. The simple reading though is that that we're not talking about where it dissolved and therefore you can't. That case is not the subject of the Mishnah, And therefore we
The
can't
Gemara does not
necessarily
seem to go in that direction.
right, and therefore we
neither
can't
do
derive that an isser. We can't create an isser about in that case.
Right.
They have no right
Okay.
to apply. You
know. Let's move into the Gemara so we get to the meat, so to speak. Someone want to go ahead and tackle the first few lines of the Gemara for us? Pretty simple first line.
This is starting on the bottom of Sadi Tet Amud Bet. It's the last line, second word in Kira Nashe.
I can do it.
Go for it.
Cool. So Gira Nashe She Nitbashel Leif Tilbarova. So this first line is like raising the kasha that we mentioned while talking about the Mishnah, which is that in the case where Bizman She'eno Makiro, which is what Rashi clarifies, why is everything Esther? Why is it not just Bitul Barov? And then the answer is Bria Shane. That like usually this is used to talk about actual full animals, but here it seems to be referring to the Gira Nashe as like a distinct thing is different. That like a so and it's not Bitul Barov.
Good. So here we have our first example, and I want folks to be keeping a running list if you have a pen or you have or anywhere you're taking notes, a running list of categories the Gemara is going to give us of things that are never batel ever, that would not be batel barov, don't play by those same rules. And the first one we have here is something called a birya. Now, this is not going to be a shiur about birya. You're going to get to the nitty gritty details of birya when you are in the halacha shiur, so we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this. But Lexi gave a nice working definition, which is a birya is either something that is like a whole entity, like a whole animal, say like a whole ant is a frequent example. Or in the case of Gira Nashe, it's a whole gid. There's something about it that in its wholeness, it is completely reprehensible and can't be interacted with and can never be batel. If you have questions on that, you should. If they're technical, I'll take them. If they're about what is this category and why is it that it's never batel, we're not going to answer them right now. Questions so far? Great. Okay, Lexi, keep us moving.
Okay. So we have the same question, but on the second half of the Mishnah. Also, in the case of like the nevela and the dag tameh, why can't they be like batel barova?
Good.
Hanicha lamanda amar kol shadar kalim not shaninu. Ella lamanda amar et shadar kalim not shaninu ma'ikalamemar. Okay, and so this statement works out for the person who said, we taught that anything which one might sell it or like kind of interacts it in such a way that you would be counting it, like isn't batel like ever, when you're counting them individually. But for the person who says it's the things that would only be like interacted with in such a way that you like count them, like what is there to say? Because meat and fish and things like that are things that like sometimes you interact them by like counting them and sometimes you like weigh them and do things like that. And so how would you square this?
Yeah, so you gave a really nice summary of basically Rashi's definition of this machloket here, which you should have gotten if you went to our sugya and beitza. We're not going to do the sugya and beitza inside. It's complicated in its own right. Does anyone want to give me just quickly the context of that sugya and beitza where we first saw this concept of kol shadar kol limanot versus et shadar kol limanot? What were they discussing there?
I think it was a beitza shenolad beyantif, right? Mm-hmm. It's like what do you do with like an egg that was like created in Yentif, and whereas the statement where it was like it wouldn't be batel even in like 1,000 eggs, and the question of like whether is that because it's like a thing that's counted, or is that because it's like a thing that'll come to be permitted. But that was the general context.
Right. So they go through a list of reasons why I might never be able to eat this egg, and it would be not batel. If it got mixed up in a lot of other eggs, it would never be batel. And there's a whole bunch of reasons listed that could be the reason. One of the reasons listed is that it is something that is darko limanot. That is something that and the best definition we saw Rashi, actually it might be worth just looking at Rashi's definition quickly. Joel, do we have this on the source sheet?
Yeah, it's on there. I have to find it because I'm not looking at the source sheet right now.
It's on page, just jump to page 4 quickly of the source sheet where we have that basis sugya. Give me a thumbs up when folks see it. It's on Besa Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Or it might be actually in Gimel Amud Bet still. I think we're in Gimel Amud Bet still.
Yeah, it's Gimel Amud Bet.
Great. So I want to read the Rashi Kol Shedarko Limanot Shaninu, just to give us a little background. And before we read this, just to restate what Lexi shared, because I think it's a helpful orientation. Shedarko Limanot, we're talking about, say you go to the grocery store and I want to buy a pound of rice, but I want to buy a dozen eggs, meaning I count them by the individual. Eggs is actually a really nice example because it translates culturally to today. We count them by number. If one is missing from my a dozen eggs, I notice. Versus if I buy a pound of flour or a kilo of flour, that's already sort of more, everything's amorphous. I might say that about certain kinds of meat also. A steak, I might buy individual steaks. I don't know this for real. I'm a vegetarian. I've outed myself as knowing nothing about meat. Everything I know about meat comes from Isser Beheter. But presumably, right, if I'm going to buy a steak, I want 6 steaks because those are like nice cuts of steak. Versus if I'm gonna buy, I don't know, ground meat, which is like maybe less quality meat, I might buy it by the kilo or by the pound. Folks, nod if you're with me or shake your head if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Great, okay. So someone read for me. So there's gonna be a machloket about how we define davar, what we call, it's darko limanot. Thank you for the thumbs up, Elizabeth, because I couldn't see you shaking or nodding. Something that's darko limanot. By the way, in later literature, we're also going to call this davar sheba minyan. You'll see it called that. Something that's darko limanot. How do we define that category? Do we define it broadly or narrowly? So Rashi's going to explain that in basis. Someone read for me. Rashi kol darko limanot shaninu.
Maybe I'll do it since people are being.
Go for it, Joel.
All right. Kol shedarko limanot shaninu. B'mishnat orla kidu lekamen delo batil. Mashma kol davar sheyesh b'nei adam hamakpidin alav mipnei chashivuto lemochro b'minyan. Beitzan nami harbe mochrin ota b'minyan. All right. So this comes from the Mishnah Orla, which we're not looking at, right? But it's not batil. And it's what's implied here, what's teaching us is anything that there are some people who are careful enough about or care enough about the importance of it to sell it by number. And eggs are in this category because lots of people sell them by number, which implies, of course, from this that in their world, not so much maybe in ours that I know of, but that sometimes eggs were sold by weight. You just, put eggs in a basket. You said, I got a pound of eggs. And sometimes, though, some people were like, no, I want to know that I have 12 eggs. And so they would sell them by number. So it's something that some people sell by number, but not everybody sells by number is the implication here.
Okay, so jumping back to our sugya, now we understand the there's a machloket here. The machloket is one side of the machloket. Oh, Joel, you're gonna have to help me with each side because I always mess them up. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, it's Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. One says kol shedarko limanot shaninu. The other says et shedarko limanot shaninu. Et shedarko limanot means what falls into this category is a very specific list of things. A very specific list of things. And it lists them out in that Mishnah, in Orla. No, it doesn't. It doesn't list them out.
I don't want to confuse too much. The Chachamim have a list of 6 or 7 things. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are different because they're per Rabbi Meir, who doesn't have a specific list. He says, but it's a question of, is it things that are only counted or things that are sometimes counted, essentially?
Meaning it's only a specific list. This is a list, everyone everywhere gets their eggs by the dozen. versus kol shedarko limanot, much more expansive. Somewhere out there, there are a handful of people who are really makpid to only buy their cherries by the cherry. Most people buy their cherries by the pound. Apologies for the noise. Most people buy their cherries by the pound, but there's a subset of people who buy their cherries by the dozen. And so because out there, there are people who do that, we count this in that category as well. For the et shedarko limanot position, the cherries would not count under that category, which means what about cherries, just to drive this home? Noam, you look like you know.
Yeah, in the et category, they are batel.
They would be batel in certain situations. They would be batel be what?
Depends what they're mixed in, but if it's yavesh b'yavesh, berov.
Berov, good. The cherries could be yavesh berov, versus for the kol shedarko limanot position, cherries could never be batel because there's someone out there that buys them or counts them individually. Folks with me?
Shani, you're reading the kol and et as referring to the people and not to the foods?
So the kol and et refers to the food, meaning, I understand why you asked that question. Read Rashi, look at Rashi again. He sort of conflates it.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, I can say it in English this way.
I think that the simpler reader you know is there are foods that are sometimes bought this way or that way, like chatichot.
Right.
You might buy for a cholent and not care, and then another day you might say, I have 10 people, I want to make sure they each get a piece.
Right.
Whereas et is eggs, you always buy that way. Right. And then it's the food that could go either way, not the percentage of people.
Right. It might be more helpful to think about sold instead of bought, meaning eggs are always sold by the dozen. We're still talking about people because people made the decision, you know, the shopkeeper made the decision, am I going to sell these by the dozen or I'm going to sell these by the pound or whatever. But in any store you go into, eggs are sold by the dozen versus, I'm making up cherries, but, and any store you go into, flour is sold by the kilo. But in some stores you go into, cherries are sold by the dozen, and in some stores you go into, cherries are sold by the kilo. And so the cherries are in between one. The cherries is not a good example because that's not actually true of cherries. If someone has a good example in like our real lives, is that in between category, which would be captured by kol davar. Feel free to toss it in.
I mean, I would stay with loads of meat. I think that it works for the
or
kol.
bananas.
You can count them, but you also generally, I don't know. I'm not sure if it makes a huge difference, but I don't think it has to do with the people or the way they sell it. It has to do with the type of food.
Well, oranges. If you're on the street in New York, you can buy an orange for $1. You can also buy a pound of oranges.
Right, because I think it does go back to the question of like, right? Wasn't it tiltan in the Mishnah, which is some kind of grain? Sorry, in Beitza, that is the question at the end, because you could count barley, but you never would. Right. But you could. So kol is broad enough to include crazy people who want to count their cherries,
right?
Even though you never would, right?
Really?
As opposed to right.
Really? There's an opinion
but you
that
just brought the people, Annalisa.
What?
Well, is it people thing, or like what's the theory behind it? Is it that these foods are so important that we would never lose sight of them? Because an egg is an interesting example, because we buy eggs by the dozen, we count our eggs, we notice in the store if we're missing an egg, but most of the time we cook an egg into a recipe and it kind of disappears into the recipe. So what's getting indicated by this category of things that are counted instead of weighed? Because it doesn't seem to be important in the actual food.
I love this. This is a very good question, and this is the question we're ultimately going to get to. So hold it, Tikva, and we're going to get back there. So we've collected another category here, right? So far, what are the categories we have of things that are never batel? In the case of Gid, it was what?
Biria.
We have Biria and
good.
Darkolim note.
Darkolim note. Good. Okay. And a question we're going to keep with us as we collect these categories of things that are never batel is why? Is there something overarching that holds them together? Are they all never batel for different reasons? And what might be the reason? So hang on to that. Okay. Where are we in the Gemara here? Okay, so Lexi, you had just read our question. Hanicha lemanda amar kol shedar kol limanot shaninu, ela lemanda amar ek shedar kol limanot shaninu, mai ika lemevar. Okay, so why is it, Lexi, go ahead and spell this out for me. Why is it that according to the kol shedar kol limanot position, we understand why this chaticha would not be batel, but according to the ek shedar kol limanot position, it could be batel. And Lisa sort of articulated this already, but go ahead and just
because like the nevela and the like dag tameh, which are the things that we had in this section of the Mishnah, are things that fall under like the kol shedar kol limanot, in the sense that like sometimes they are counted and sold that way, but that's not the exclusive way that they're sold. So for somebody who thinks anything that sometimes is sold that way, like this makes sense, they wouldn't be batel. But if you think it's only things that are like exclusively sold by like minyan, then like meat and fish should be able to be batel.
Yafe. Okay. Keep reading. We got one more line to go here.
Okay. Shani chaticha, however, yali tkabed ba'ali fnei ha'orchim. Do you want me to finish the paragraph, or do you want me to just explain that first?
Go ahead and explain that first, please. Yep.
Okay, so like a piece of meat is different because it's like, it like could be your entree for like your guests. Like this would be like a significant thing that you would present like in and of itself. That even if it's not a birya in the sense that like yidamashe is like, and even if it doesn't fall into this shedar kol limanot, if something is significant enough, this would be like the main thing you're presenting to a guest. Then it's also not batel.
Good. So we've got a third category here, or maybe not. You're already trying to sort of relate it to our other categories, which is very natural. So what's our third category? You can even just say it in Hebrew.
Ru'ya litkabed.
Ru'ya litkabed, right? Something I would serve to my guests, or serve possibly individually to our guests. So we're going to ask the question what exactly that means. Okay. Okay. And finishes off with our little tzricha here.
Yeah, tzricha di'yesh minan gid mishum de biryehi aval chaticha imala di'yesh minan chaticha oil v'yalit kapeza ifnei orchim aval gid imala tzricha. And this just explains why we need the two different portions of the Mishnah, because they're explaining two different categories that are never batel. That like if it had just taught gid, I would have maybe known the birya category, but I would have thought that like a chaticha, which isn't its own entity in the same way, which is not totally clear why, but whatever, like could be batel. If it had only been the second part, I would have thought only things that you would kind of serve as a main sort of thing before guests. So we need both parts of the Mishnah.
Good. Yes. Okay. Questions on the pshat of the Gemara here? Like technical questions. Okay. All right. So let's talk about these categories. Okay. So we have a list, and here maybe I think I'm going to actually share my screen for the purposes of having, let's see, I'm going to make a Google Doc, of having a board for us to kind of use. So I'm going to share screen, and it's going to be this guy. Okay. So let's just list our categories one more time. Throw them out here. What are the things that could never be batel?
Birya.
I'm going to write it in English just because it stays on the same side of the page. Actually, maybe I'll do both. Syria. Okay. What else?
Dvar sh'ra'ui להתכבד.
Oy להתכבד. Good.
And shedar kol limanot.
I'm also just going to put in parentheses Dvar sheba minyan, which is how we'll see it later on. Okay.
And in Beitza, in the Gemara, it uses the language of chashuvah.
Good. Say more about what we learned about chashuvah in Beitza. If you remember, we can also hop over there.
It sort of appears as they introduce it that they translate chashuvah into darkoli manot. But it's, you know, it's sort of like two sources languages being then integrated.
Good. I want to pause on that because I think this is something that we're going to see over and over in the course of the study of Isser V'Heter in general, which is the two different sources having two different terminologies, and then the Gemara kind of putting them together. And often then the Rishonim are going to try and reconcile different categories that maybe weren't native to the same place. So the reason often trying to come up with categories that are coherent in kashrut is so difficult is because we're drawing from lots of different sources. We've already seen this in this shir on Hullin. We already had to jump to Beitza. There's also one in Zvachim. They're drawing from different sources, different generations, and different frameworks possibly, and then trying to make a coherent whole of them. That's just like my angsty soapbox of, if you're confused going forward, that is one reason why. And noticing when that's happening is useful for understanding why something is particularly confusing or difficult to untangle, and why when you get to the Rishonim and the Acharonim, they often are going to be twisting themselves into knots, trying to figure out what is the overarching theme or concept happening here. So I'm going to write chashuvah. And with chashuvah, there's just sort of this asterisk here, which is this an overarching category?
Well, so we also have davar, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to finish the sentence. Meaning, does chashivut characterize all of these different concepts, or is it its own category? And it's not so clear in Beitza which it is. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see who was chiming in.
That was me. I just want to say that in Beitza, it feels like the one thing that doesn't seem to fit under chashivut, like the davar sheyesh lo matirim, feels distinct from a lot of these other categories. Like I feel like you could make a pretty easy case that like Syria, it's a distinct entity, like something you would fit to a guess. That's like, you know, like different, like something that you would count and you would notice it because you're counting each piece. Those all feel like different kind of forms of chashivut, whereas like davar sheyesh lo matirim kind of feels like its own category.
Good. So I'm gonna, if I make, say, these ones blue, and the chashuvah is going to be purple, or maybe it's an overarching category, maybe it's blue. Davar sheyesh lo matirin feels like it actually may stick out and be a totally different color altogether.
If I can just add in that it's and this may be overlapping with a lot of them, but and then I want to push on Birya and also I'll do three things to try to do. One is Balei Chaim is in Tzvachim is another category, which also might be a Chashivut category. And two things. One is that I think if you're going to say Kol Shedar Koli Manot, if you're going to paskin like Reish Lakish, then you might not need a lot of these categories, actually. It's like really interesting is that a lot of these categories seem to come in to just be to salvation for Rebbe Yochanan at the end of the day.
Joel, can you say more with that, what you mean by that?
Yeah, if like essentially if anything that can be numbered, like in the marketplace, is never batel, then you don't need, Birya might, that's the one thing I'm going to push back on, because Birya might be something that you wouldn't even though you can count it, like nobody would ever sell, you wouldn't even sell these things, right? Who sells a gid on Hashem, right? Like, who sells a gid? But for the rest of them, right, Balei Chaim, Ruyalit Kabed, those are all cases that somebody's going to sell. They're important enough on their own. That means somebody out there is selling them by number. And therefore, Reish Lakish with one category, with one kind of fell swoop, covers all of them, versus Rabbi Yochanan, who refuses, and I'm not sure why, but it might be just his Girsa of Rabbi Meir, it might be for some other reason, who doesn't want to go there. He only wants things that are for sure sold by number and not things that can be numbered, and therefore we need to create other categories to help Rabbi Yochanan out.
I think if we take away the marketplace piece, it works even for Birya to say that these are all things that are significant or identifiable as individual entities, right? That we relate to them as individual entities, even applies to Birya and certainly to all of the others, although Davar sheyesh lo matirin still is the odd one out.
So it feels like sort of where we're coming down on is chashivut seems to be a thing. Possibly chashuva is its own category of chashivut, possibly not. We'd have to investigate what that would mean. Our blue categories seem to sort of center around that, as Joel points out. Possibly this darkoli manot is the major marker of chashivut, and then we have to come up with subcategories of chashivut to basically address Reish Lakish's limitation. Did I summarize that right, Joel? Yeah.
Rabbi Yochanan, but yeah.
Rabbi Yochanan's limitation. Well, yes. Reish Lakish limits the scope, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan is in a tough spot.
No, Rabbi Lakish is expansive. He says anything counted, right? So it's Rabbi
Right,
Yochanan.
I messed up our chart then.
Yeah.
I told you guys I was going to have a difficult time with this.
Can I make one more point, Shani? Is that okay?
Yeah, go
from
for
the
it.
Gemara itself, that last piece that Lexi read, the Sricha, is really, I just thinking about this, and maybe someone can push back on me, is the fact that we have to say that we needed to teach both Birya and Realit Kabed sounds like the two can't be derived from one another, and therefore maybe they are actually different categories. Like Chashivut, an overarching category of Chashivut can't be learned there. Or maybe you needed both to teach Chashivut, I'm not sure. But there's at least something distinct about those two categories.
Well, I feel like there's a difference between saying things are like related versus you couldn't learn one thing from another. But I feel like often when we like can definitely learn one thing from another, it's maybe in some kind of kal v'chomer structure, right? Whereas in this case, it's one that like I might have considered that, like I might have like thought about the other thing if I had only learned one of them, but it wouldn't have seemed like definitive that would also be like Eino Batel, that like people measure chashivut in different ways. And so I needed to be taught that like these different forms of chashivut are all ones that we think are like Eino Batel.
But you could actually split this list between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan and say that Birya and Balei Chaim, if that applies to an ant, are things that can be counted individually, even though you wouldn't really want to most of the time. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says anything, things that are usually sold by number, that would be Chashuva and Darkol Himanot and Ra'ui Kabed. So sometimes it overlaps, countable, and your desire to buy by number lines up with your desire to have enough food for a specific number of guests. But in other cases, you can count a gid and you can count an ant, and that doesn't make it into something significant or respected in a mealtime setting.
Right. Where that's going to get a little complicated is when you see later sources, there will be some conflating between whole Balei Chaim being whole and there being chashuv. And when we decide, for example, is a plucked chicken, once the chicken has been plucked, is it chashuv anymore? Meaning, does it now fall under the category of Balei Chaim, or doesn't it? So I like the idea of separating them out, and I think it's a plausible way to sort of separate them out. There are two categories. One is things that are important and things that are whole. And we'll see places where those are conflated as well. Other thoughts on general categories that we can either place all of these things in or a subsection of these things in? I don't have one in mind, just if folks have ideas. So I think this is where we'll stop.
I would just say there's some place in the Orient that they're selling Gita Nashon as Gita Nashon. There's no doubt in my mind now. It's one thing we've learned. That's one point. The second point is
Rav,
just not to.
Can you say more about what particularly you think that's important for the discussion?
I think it's important for discussion is that chashivut just may be a marketplace understanding, just how people respond. If they sell it on their own, if they sell it by numbers on their own, then it has a designated chashivut, even though it might not fit into some. It has an empirical reality as opposed to a theoretical. It has no theoretical defense, except you can go to the marketplace and you can go get, and you can go buy your Gita and Usha. That's what they do, even though you might not have thought of that, but that's where it is. The second part with that is why it's important is not to get carried away, not that anybody has, but not to be carried away where the origins of the arguments have come from, because then halachically they will have their own chashivuts, as they get fleshed out. But these are just comments.
Yeah, and I think when sort of you arrive at the later sources, particularly around the conversation about davar shebaminyan, there's going to be an extensive conversation about cultural context and how that influences our understanding of the chashivut of a thing.
So maybe the Chachamim should be here somewhere where they have a list of 6 very specific things. I
right,
don't know if
and that's going to come back.
Yeah, so maybe that should be added.
Yeah, good. Okay, we're gonna take a 5. Yeah.
When we get into halacha on this, it's actually quite a fun topic in terms of trying to figure out how to paskin. So it's a very good basis for it.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, Joel is gonna lead us through the second half of the sugya, which returns us to that question: is this a lach balach category, or is this a yavesh v'yavesh category in that in-between position? So up until now, we were speaking basically in yavesh v'yavesh terms, meaning we have a bunch of pieces together. When can they not be batel barov? That was the primary question. Now we're going to get into the question basically of where ta'am fits in to this situation, and how these yavesh pieces interact with a greater lach mixture. So stay tuned, 5 minutes. In my time, it will be 12:06 when we return.
Can you unshare your screen?
If you makiro, which we understood to be that you threw it out, let's take the Rashi for the moment, then it was benoten tam. And in the rotev, it was also benoten tam. So it sounded like its interaction in its battle with the pieces was in noten tam, and its interaction in battle with the rotev was like a separate battle. There was like a yavesh v'yavesh battle and a lach belach battle, yavesh belach battle, going on there. So I just want to kind of keep that in the background, because now we're going to get to Rabba Bar Bar Chana and potentially Rav's opinions here in the Gemara. And we're going to take these, Miriam's going to read, but I'm going to interrupt you a few times if that's okay.
Great, yeah.
So just to remind people, we're in like the middle of the daf. My line, not all printings are the same, but my line starts Avalgid Ema Lasricha, but we're actually going to start right after that, Darash Rabba Bar Bar Chana. So go ahead.
All right, Darash Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Chaticha shel Nevila v'shel Dag Tameh, Eina Oseret ad shetitein tam barotev uvekifa uvechatichot. Okay. Rabba Bar Bar Chana taught, if a piece of nevela or of unkosher fish does not forbid unless it imparts flavor to the broth, the remnants, and the other pieces in the pot.
Great. So just to start out, what has Rabba Bar Bar Chana done here? Maybe he hasn't done anything. I don't know. To me, he seems to have done something.
He's put everything in the realm of noten tam.
Good, right? Everything is together. All the forces that are in that pot, all the stuff that's in it, are marshaled against this chaticha of nevela, as opposed to the chatichot against the chaticha and the rotev against the chaticha. Combining that whole thing as all the forces are fighting together. It doesn't matter that some are yavesh, some are lach, some are mean, some are not mean, right? They all come together to fight this one chaticha that has fallen in there. Okay. Any thoughts just on that before we get to the Rav's response here? Okay, keep going, Miriam, please.
Well, that's just a question. That's Nevela versus everything else, which is looking ahead to the mean nova devar acher situation.
Great. There is a question in the background, I think, sitting in this whole thing of what kind of mean is the nevela in the first place, right? It seems that the Mishnah itself was talking about a gira nasha, and then maybe by extension, the chaticha nevela, we're talking about mean b'mino situations, potentially. That's what I would guess. But it's not 100% clear. So at least the way I understood it. So anyway, keep going, please.
Awesome. Great.
So again,
Oki Rav Amora Ale, the Darash. Kevan shenatan ta'am b'chaticha, chaticha atzman na'aseit nevela, v'oseret kol ha'chatichot kulan, mipnei shehen mina.
Great.
Okay. So Rav had a speaker stand by him to a professional loudspeaker to say very loudly, talking over Rabba Bar Bar Hana, and he said, since the piece imparted flavor, the piece itself, meaning the formerly kosher piece that was fine a second ago, is made nevela, and that piece, the newly nevela piece, forbids all the pieces, for they are of the same type, namely no, therefore nullification doesn't apply.
Great. Okay, we're going to get into what all these categories mean in a second because the statement's very confusing. I want to say something. If you don't want to be more confused, just shut your ears for like 30 seconds here. But it's as an interesting point. I looked this up. There's four times in the Gemara we get this idea of oke amora ale. Every time except for this one is Rava. And actually, this is an interesting side note. Rav and Rabba Bar Hana do not. Rabba Bar Hana is a third generation Amora. Rav is a first generation Amora. It's unlikely the two of them ever interacted. So I do imagine that there is something going on here with, like, it might not be the same people that we think. All right, that's all a side note. I will say there is a Rabba Bar Hana in the first generation, the first generation Amora and Bavel. So it is possible that's it. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out as an interesting thing. But
if he spoke very loudly,
he could wake the dead, and actually not wake the dead, wake the future. In this case, Rav would be as just a short translation point, like okay would be like he'emid, right? It would be the afel of ka'em, right? So, worth knowing. Okay, so Rav is like so exasperated, he gets a guy to out yell. This is like all the debates we see everywhere in the world. He gets someone to out yell Rabba Bar Hana to tell them that the halacha isn't like that at all. All right, so what is Rav saying? So let's break it down. All right, so he says, first off, because it, or since it, or when even probably kasher, when it gave ta'am to the chaticha atzman na'aset nevela. What does that mean? Without thinking about, just like to you, you're reading this Gemara, like the shot of the Gemara on its own.
As soon as it noten tam, even the kosher pieces now has the status of nevela.
Great. To what extent? What does that mean?
Asur lechol davar.
Asur lechol davar. Okay. What else could it mean?
And that could also infect other pieces. If that piece that technically originally was kasher came into contact with this nevela, and then you take out the nevela and you put the previously kosher piece in with another pot, that whole pot's also off the table, literally.
Great. To what ratio are we talking about here?
According to this, there is no ratio. It's
okay, good, because we're going to go Rebbe
Yehuda.
Yes. So great. So let's say we put it in a pot of, this is not the case here, but a pot of chatichot that were not mino, right? Or we put it in just liquid. You dropped it in soup, right? What does it become? What's the situation where it's not sen nevela? How much soup do you need against this piece now, this former heter piece, now isur piece, in order to overcome its nevela status?
So the nafkamina seems to be that we measure against the entire piece, like it itself is a full thing of Issa, rather than what was like balua.
Great. Perfect. Yeah. Right. So that's one way to understand it, is that naset nevela means that it itself, you can imagine the case where you have, like, I don't know, a tiny piece of nevela and a piece that's 59 times as big, right? That it drops on. The two have a flavor exchange that goes on, and now you have this 59 times the original size former heter. If that thing itself is like you'd have to marshal forces against that entire thing. Of course, we're min b'mino, so it may not even matter. But just chatechana nevela, that might be what it means. Okay, so all right, so that's part one. It's not se nevela. All right, then the next piece is ve'oser kol hachatichot kulan. So what does that mean? Why?
Well, I think you got to take the end of it, mipnei shehen mina. And
Good.
so going back to the idea of Rabbi Yehuda loves to say, we know lo batel.
Exactly, right? So my question there is, does it even matter that the thing was not se nevela? Was atma not se nevela? Like, if it's min b'mino, doesn't just the balua in it, like, it doesn't matter how much balua is in it, right?
That's interesting. So it's like, it doesn't. What is the difference between it's made nevela and it absorbs the taste of nevela?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another way to say what Miriam's saying is basically, what is the relationship between nitinat ta'am and min b'mino here? If this is an issue of min b'mino, why do we care about nitinat ta'am? Kevan shenatan ta'am b'chaticha. If we care about kevan shenatan ta'am b'chaticha and this nevela mechanism, why do we care that it's a min b'mino mixture?
Yeah, this is going to be Rav Safra's issue, and also going to be, in addition to that, why everyone, based on his answer, everyone's going to have what I think is a very odd shita of trying to figure out what is going on here, because we're trying to mix netinat tam with min b'mino eino batel, and those two things don't seem to be working in the same frame of bitul, right? One is there is no bitul, and one is bitul based on netinat tam. We're going to read the Rashi, don't worry, but I want to do it without the Rashi the first time through, just so we can, kind of, Yavni, you have a confused look on your face. Maybe I'm just reading that into things, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, right, what I was trying to understand right now is chaticha. Right, I think it's just the question that you're asking. I'm trying to, so the idea is there's one chaticha that you can tell that it was given the taste of the other chaticha, and then all the other chatichot are also asurot. Then why were you even asking about the first one?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it that the other chatichot, if you don't know that they were given taste, then as long as one of them was given taste, that the other ones are asur? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, the thing is once, right, and this is what's going to come up, once it has any flavor of nevela, and once it becomes, I don't want to say flavor, once it becomes a nevela, right, it doesn't matter if it had got, how much tam it got, if it was netinat tam or not. Once it becomes a nevela itself, then or even the original nevela is just oser kulan. And the other possibility, right, is that you can imagine, and you could have imagined, well, let me actually put it this way. You can imagine if the Gemara didn't say mipnei shehen mina, then the whole sugya makes sense, where he says kevan shenatan tam b'chaticha chaticha atzman nasa nevela ve'oser kol hachatichot kulan. Why? Because now you have two pieces of isur, not one, and you might have had 60-1 before, but you only have 30-1 now, right? That you could have said that, right? But that doesn't seem to be the case, because the Gemara ends mipnei shehen mina, and therefore the amount of tam given is irrelevant to that point. And so it really just is, there was isur, right? Min b'mino, tam is not a relevant factor in general in this world of Rabbi Yehuda, who says min b'mino eino batel. So,
can I jump in here?
Yeah,
because
please.
If you're like me and need a visual aid to understand what is going on, we wanted to do, and Yavni, maybe you especially as an artist, I think we'll begin to wrap your head around this a little better if we do a little drawing exercise. So I want everyone. Do folks have a pen and a piece of paper in front of them? Give a thumbs up or go grab one. We're going to spend 2 to 4 minutes trying to imagine what it is that's happening here physically. And you all have seen Rashi and Tosfot, so try to clear your minds. Maybe, if you're lucky, you didn't understand what they were talking about. So clear your minds. And I'm going to actually put up on the screen the statement of Rav. I'm going to do that now. Stare at the statement of Rav. Try to absorb it. Why isn't it not good? Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, here's our whiteboard. Okay. Stare at this and then take a few minutes to draw what you think happened. It could be a diagram, a picture. What happened? It could be like a phase by phase. It could be a cartoon. There could be arrows. And then we're going to ask folks to try to reconstruct for us the situation that Rav is imagining. I'm going to put like 3 minutes on the clock, and folks just give a thumbs up when you've drawn your drawing. Right, folks, give a thumbs up when your drawing feels about as good as it's going to get. A physical thumbs up or a virtual thumbs up will do. Okay. All right, take another minute. Great, okay. Anyone want to be courageous? And I will not judge your drawing skills, just for a taster. This is what my drawing skills look like. So folks should feel free to share your drawing and tell us how your drawing accounts for each of these lines in Rav. We're going to call on people at random, don't worry, if you don't volunteer, so you could like get it over with. Yavni, how do you feel about going first?
Sure, although the fact that you introduced me as an artist makes me more nervous, but sure.
You don't have puppets?
Can you take us off share screen so we can?
Yes, I will.
Oh, but then, okay, yeah. All right, I was just trying to make it a maybe more detailed one, but let me show this one first. So the way can you see it? The way I was reading it was maybe, so there's this nevela, and you can tell because it's got cross eyes and it's, so the cross eyes is nevela and the frowny is asul. And I put them in separate things. So this one joins it, it gives the taste to this one. So this one gets the taste and therefore it becomes also nevela. And these are all not nevela, but they are asul. So they still have living eyes, but they're frowny faces. That was my take.
Okay, so how is the, yes, applause also for going first and showing your guys. Folks, how do we make sense? Do we think this is a drawing that is an accurate depiction of Rav? Or do people have questions about it?
Photorealistic, what do you mean accurate depiction?
Super realistic. No, go ahead.
I think it's a good depiction of how Tosa would like it to appear. Like, I actually, when I drew mine, I can do mine in a second, but that like when you're cooking, food that you put in touches other food that you put in first, and then it touches other food. Meaning you put something in a pot, everything is not automatically gonna touch each other at the same time. So seemingly that first piece that is touched by the nevela then becomes a nevela itself, and then it messes up the whole pot.
Good. Okay, so I just want to can I want to jump in, Noam, and say, like, you're adding, and maybe Yavni's doing this too, you're adding, like, there's a time factor, right? Things don't, the Isser doesn't just like spread out through everything all at once, right? It takes time. There is an interaction with an initial piece, and then there's like further interaction after time. Am I saying that correctly, or is that?
And Yavne and Noam, what is, in your drawings, and Noam, you can share yours as well, what is the relationship between our pieces and the rotev?
What do you mean?
I don't know if you can see.
Oh, I see.
Where are your various pieces positioned with relationship to the rotev?
I have the pieces in the rotev.
All of the pieces.
As did I. Truthfully, I wasn't paying so much attention to the rotev, and I was much more focusing on the chatichot. So that's me.
Can we see Elisa's picture again? That was.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it bigger. I can't. At 10:30,
yeah,
today is mixing together, so I'm sure that I read this in one of the things I read, but I do have this sense that, like, even that one of the pieces is sort of piled up, sticking outside of the rotev, and so that you have some kind of clear vision of two things touching each other, and then whether they get mixed, I think maybe that was Rabbi Ephraim, I'm not sure, whether they get mixed or whether we think of it as diffusing down through the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of moment, and this actually goes back to this Mishnah about whether you can take it out or not. There's almost a snapshot. What happens at this moment? And that's why the Mishnah maybe doesn't even mention that you take it out. But in a snapshot of a moment, you have two equal parts, and so you don't have rove. And then the snapshot of the next moment, all of a sudden you have two big chunks in a pot full of stew or something like that.
Yeah.
And can you say more about the motivation to keep those pieces outside of the rotev in that first snapshot?
So it could be, if we're starting with yavesh b'yavesh and we're thinking about rove, that when you have two pieces in that moment, you don't have the possibility of employing the pot and the stew and the other pieces of meat for 1 versus 60. You only have two equal pieces. I mean, he doesn't actually talk about the amounts at all, but let's just assume they're roughly, it's not rove. It's not 2 to 1, it's 1 to 1.
It's like when, I don't know if people played Risk back in the day. Is that still a game people play, right? And you try and conquering the world, and if you had, like 5 armies against 1, and then you had behind it, 10 armies, then, right, the 10 armies behind didn't help you because the 5 would defeat the 1 initially, and it wouldn't be till later that those forces would come into play. And so there's a factor like that. I also want to just make a comment about Yavni's, where the other chatichot are asur, but they're not nevelot, which I hadn't thought about. I don't know, but it kind of has like some reflection on the world of tuma, where that you can have like rishon l'tuma, you can have shenit l'tuma, where things can have like, they can be infected but not infect other things, or not infect other things at quite high a level, which I don't know how that interacts here, so I don't want to like confuse it too much, but there is some sense that could be what's going on. Is only the first piece only becomes a nevelah. Any subsequent piece is asur, but doesn't quite infect in the same way, potentially. I'm not sure. Which is why in that case you need it to be min b'mino, because otherwise then all the pieces don't get infected in that sense. So.
All right, so Joel's going to take us through how Rashi and the Tosfot basically draw their pictures, but I wanted to bring us through this exercise mostly to give us a sense of sort of, as we're interpreting the lines, like what are Rashi and the Tosfot dealing with? And part of what they're dealing with is trying to figure out, like, by what process does one chaticha make another a nevelah? And in the process of asking that question, they're going to be motivated to kind of come up with a somewhat outlandish pictures of what actually took place, because in some sense they need to isolate those first two, either for the reason Elisa said, because like then we don't have rov, and so one can't be mevatel the other, or in the tam language, if that first nevelah one falls in with all of the rest at the same time, then like Joel said, we've got our armies of tam to conquer the tam of the original piece. So in either case, we've got to somehow isolate those our original novela and like, you know, Isser 0, right? Our patient 0 of heter that then becomes infected. All these infection images felt much less heavy last year. Throwing that out there. So we have to isolate them in some way. And so Rashi and the Tosfot are going to come up with different ways, basically, of creating that initial intimacy between those two pieces. That's a nice imagery, not an illness imagery for us, or war imagery. Great. Okay, and for extra bonus Chazara points, if you want to either send your diagram to the listserv later or create a new one later and send it to us after we read Rashi and the Tosfot, that's Chazara bonus for your own learning.
Miriam, can I count on you to do the Rashi and part of the Tosfot too? Is that okay if I?
Yeah, Rashi is great. Tosafot might be a little bit more of an adventure, but Rashi is definitely great.
Great. We're just based on time. So I want you to look at the Rashi Kivan Natnatam Bachaticha. And then, so just to set up his case here of what he thinks is going on. So that's, I don't know what number. It's about halfway down the narrow lines in the, on the daf. And if you're in the document, I actually hyperlinked all the Rashis, but.
Bottom of page 1, it looks like.
Yeah, it's at towards the bottom of page 1. It's the fourth Rashi from the bottom. So.
Oh, there we are. Okay.
Great.
Kevan shenatna ta'am b'chaticha. אחת שהייתה בצדה תמיד, או שנתבשלה תחילה עמה, קודם שייתן שאר החתיכות בקדרה.
Right, stop there for a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
Go for it.
Okay, so one that was on the side, b'tzeda tamid, that always stayed on the side of the pot, or b'tzeda?
Yeah, of the tzida, of the so you have two chatichot of heter and of isur, and they were on each other's side the entire time, right? So they were attached at the hip from the beginning, in other words, is what he's saying. So.
Oh, okay. So the novella piece and the piece in question are touching constantly, or they were cooked together before the rest of the pieces were added into the pot.
Yeah. So Rashi's dealing with the case here. He's creating this as a case of you had two pieces cooked together, and then later you're going to add all the other pieces to the pot. Okay. Or they were somehow, already attached at the hip from the beginning and cooked, and then, with everything else. So, okay, keep going. So.
Wow, I have so many questions, but I guess I'll keep going. Velo haya bezo shishim beisur v'natna hanavela ta'am ba ve'achar kach natan sha'ar hachatichot b'kedera. Okay. And there was not in this mixture.
Bezo, I think it's bezo.
Parts of.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Bezo is bechatichazo. In this heter chaticha doesn't have shishim. So.
Oh, okay. And the piece in question doesn't have 60. The isur is not nullified in shishim.
Exactly.
Okay, and thus, or in other words, the novella imparted flavor to the piece in question. And then after that, the rest of the pieces of good kosher meat were added into the pot.
Yeah, and keep going. Just read the next one, chaticha. I think this will help us a little bit too.
Okay, chaticha zo shekabla ta'am hanevela na'aseit nevela atzma. Okay, so this piece that received the taste of the novella was made novella itself. So back to the concept ta'am ke'ikar.
Great, which is right an interesting thing, because I think the interesting thing Rashi here is we're presuming that, and he'll say this later out, that the nevela is the same mean as the other thing, but it somehow doesn't become a nevela itself, the heter, until it gets enough time, even though it's mean b'mino, right?
Do you want to drop the word, Charles, the word used earlier, attached at the hip?
You're right. Touching, or I think would be a better term.
It's betzida, because it has its own integrity. Nonetheless, it gets infected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair. Okay, no, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. That they're two separate pieces. They're not the same. It's not one piece that has half nevela and half kshera, but rather it's two pieces, but they have some more joining between the two of them than everything else somehow, is what Rashi seems to be thinking here. So either they were cooked first together or they were together first before everything else. So here he doesn't paint us a picture of how it works when they're together with everything else. He more seems to focus on the case where the two of them were cooked together first and then everything else was added. And the Tosfot are going to focus on that case a little bit more too. So what's crazy about the Rashi case, by the way, I just like, maybe it's not crazy. To me, it seems a little crazy, which I think.
Well, I guess I'm sort of wondering, like the question that I had before I read the second half, which it didn't quite seem to answer, is like, so it's cooked first with these two pieces are cooked first together, and then the rest of the pieces are added in, but he doesn't say whether or not the original nevela was removed, but I guess it doesn't matter if the second piece is nevela, just like the first piece.
Yeah, actually, the earlier Rashi where he says Chati Chashan Avela says umakira, he seems to be implying, because he had defined makira earlier as you tossed it out, so he seems to think that the nevela at some point gets thrown out, but maybe not. It's a good question. So don't disregard what I just said, because there's another place where I think I might be wrong there. So, I want to just look at the Tosfot in comparison, which is a little bit different case. By the way, the thing that I think is a little bit crazy with the Rashi is we haven't seen anywhere this idea that the two things were cooked together first, like separately, and then you added everything else, right? That's just not. It doesn't seem to be a pshat, which is Sorry,
it was the implication in Rashi that the first one alone would be batal. It would be like 1 in 60, and it's because you have the second one now that it's larger, because otherwise why do you that's why it has to be a special case, because we're talking about a case where the original piece of meat would be batal.
Good. It could be I'm channeling the Tosfot too much, but it could be that Rashi's saying it doesn't need to be 1 in 60 to be batel. It's min b'mino. It might always be asur, but in order to be kamei nevela itself, to be chanan chatichat atzman nase nevela, that needs a less than 60 to 1 ratio. That might be what the Rashi's saying there. So,
meaning what he's saying about 60 to 1 is we're talking about the conflict between, or the interaction between the original nevela and the first piece of heter it encounters, right? So there shishim is important, because if they encounter each other, but there is shishim of this piece keneged the ta'am of the original nevela, according to Rashi, nothing has happened, right? Does that make sense?
Right. No, I'm asking if you add in 60 more pieces, so you just had the original nevela and you added 60 pieces, now this original piece would be batal and everything would be fine. But because you have the original piece of asur, and then you have the second piece that becomes nevela, then you add 60 more pieces, now it's not batal b'shishi. So that's what she's talking about?
Well, I think the problem here is that it's not, because the 60 to 1 doesn't apply because it's min b'mino and we're going per Rebbe Yehuda. And what Rashi has to do is create a case where one of them becomes an nevela and becomes a problem for everything else, right? Which is, we haven't read the Rav Safra yet, Abaye's response to Rav Safra, but somehow we've thrown out that original piece, right? And we've done it in some sort of manner that we don't care about the original piece anymore, but we are worried about this heter somehow being able to infect everybody else. As I said, you're hitting on the confusion of this whole thing. It's not so clear how this manages to be that. Why isn't the nevela itself just doesn't infect everything else? Min b'mino, eino batel, end of story, right? So.
And the explanation given was that the nevela has been taken away, but because it was cooked with this other piece of meat that you then put into the soup.
Exactly. Yeah, something like that.
And there's essentially still a nevela in there that I don't recognize and I haven't taken out.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at time. So what I want to do, I think, let's look at the end of the Tosfot of Chatichat Zman Nase Nevela, starting from the Yesh Lomar. Tosfot up until there is going to challenge Rashi's explanation here. I don't want to get into how they challenge it. I just want to see what their scenario is for the moment, just to see a second scenario. And then we're going to go through the rest of the sugya. And if we have time, we're going to look at the beginning of the next Tosfot, B'Shekadam Uslako, to see how they kind of solve this whole thing. And also what I think are really important is Rabbeinu Ephraim's shita on all of this. which will be halachically incredibly important in the future. So, okay, so let's see, who is Miriam? You up for reading starting from the Yesh Lomar and the Tosfot on Chatichat Atzmanas 7 Nevela?
Sure, let's give it a try. Okay. V'yesh lomar demaire kagon sheyesh chaticha shel heter kula chutz lerotev v'chatichot nevela munachat aleha chutz lerotev v'naaset chatichot heter nevela lefi shebolaat ta'am nevela de'ein bahen shishim levatel hata'am ve'acharei chen כשמנער הקדרה אוסרת כל החתיכות מפני שהן מינה. Okay, so and one may say, meaning we're going to conclude with, that we're dealing with a situation, for example, that there are permitted pieces all outside of the broth.
Good. I just want to correct one thing. It's chaticha shel
yeah.
heter. It's a single permitted piece. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. One single permitted piece that it itself is entirely out of the broth or liquid, whatever, and a piece of nevela is rested upon it, also outside of the broth, and the piece of permitted meat is made nevela because it swallows the taste of nevela that isn't, well, so now I'm a little bit confused because it's the same confusion I had as last time. It swallows the taste of nevela, but the taste of nevela is too small to affect it.
Great. It's the ein bahen, by the way. Here, I have a Hagot V'Tzionim that says it actually should be ba according to the Gilyon, which makes more sense.
That helps.
This is like one of the major problems in this Tosfot here is like the number seems to be switching around. Is it singular or is it plural? And that makes a difference. So, but let's read it.
For balat, it's better you just use the word absorb.
Absorbed. Okay. So.
Okay.
As opposed to swell.
Okay, that it absorbs the flavor of the nevela, but not greater than 60-1. So meaning to say it's a small enough amount, and thus the taste is nullified. And after that, when the pot is baked.
Yeah, so the ein ba shishim levatel tam, it doesn't have 60-1 to nullify the taste of in this interaction between the two pieces of heter and nevela. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so that when the heter and the nevela come into contact, there's too much nevela to become nullified. There's enough taste that it's not nullified, and then after that, when the pot is stirred up, it forbids all of the other pieces in the pot, meaning the ones that were presumably underneath the rotev the whole time, because they're of the same type.
Exactly. So I just want to point out, right, the Tosfot here actually has some interesting, I think, halachic significance to it. Of you can have local interaction. Rashi might be implying this as well, but you can have local interaction, and until you actually mix everything together, like the forces don't come into play of all the other pieces. That you actually need some sort of mixing or some sort of like traveling, which we'll see in other places, of like fat going through maybe or something like that for everything to kind of mix in the flavors and to become an issue.
And what do you need before the mixing to have any impact at all?
You need, that's great. So that's the other point, is that in order to make that chaticha nevela itself, you need a less than 60-1 ratio between those initial interacting pieces in order to make that piece a nevela itself. Otherwise, it just has enough force by itself to cancel out the nevela. So. It might be still that you have to get rid of that piece because it interacted and absorbed any amount of nevela, min b'mino, right? But it might just be those two pieces that are an issue now, and you could throw them out potentially. So, which is right. We've come into like this weird intersection between where tam does matter in min b'mino, even for Rebbe Yehuda, but it only matters to a small extent, right? It matters for that initial interaction. But it matters, but Tom matters in terms of can that second piece infect everything else or not. But it doesn't matter in terms of, is it batel in general? So which is very confusing, I think, right? Because we now have created a world where tam matters and it doesn't matter at the same time. So with that, how are we doing on time? 3:43. So I'd like to finish at least the Gemara up here. So let's read Rav. Let me pause. Sorry. Are there any questions at this point? Technical questions, challenges, things you think that I glaringly messed up?
Before we get to the part where we actually explicitly bring in Rabbi Yehuda, I guess we're already using the language of Shehen Mina, but is there any connection with the previous part of the sugya that chatichot are considered chashuv, ra'oi litkabed, and that is playing some role here?
Yeah, I think it could have, and the fact that they jump in and say it has to be Rabbi Yehuda, right, means that they're taking it out of that category. It's not about that. And you could even imagine, right, that this nevela that was dropped on was like a piece of scrap meat that isn't really kabed, or there's soup meat, right? There's pieces of meat in soup, right, or in a stir fry or something like that, where you don't care. We're not talking about like a nice steak you would put in front of somebody. We're talking about, pieces of meat that you chopped up very finely and just threw in, or ground up, pieces, not ground up pieces, but, small pieces of meat that you put in a pan.
I have to say though, I think that's a really good question, Eliza, because what Joel just shared, what that requires is that in the first half of this interpretation of the Mishnah and the second half, we've decided that the Mishnah is talking about two different scenarios. Meaning in our question about why those pieces weren't batel barov, we answered one way, and Rav seems to be taking a different course by actually, I think the reason we need to bring in Rabbi Yehuda at all is because Rav explicitly says Mipnei Shehen Mina, which causes all sorts of problems that then we need to answer. One of the problems they're addressing have to do with the relationship between Min B'Minos, Never Batel, and Tam, which would also be the case if we said it was Never Batel because it was absorbed the taste. But I think you're bringing up another problem of Rav mentioning Min B'Minos specifically, which is we didn't need that to decide this was Never Batel. We in our previous discussion, the Stam decided to include a whole previous discussion where the reason it's not batel is a whole host of other reasons potentially.
Which I think is right. The brilliance here is that it's coming in to bring us a different case, right, where we're not dealing with cases of chashivut. We're dealing with a whole nother reason why things wouldn't be batel, min b'mino, potentially per Rabbi Yehuda, and this idea of hanan, right, which we have to would only becomes applicable if there's no chashivut involved. So. So Miriam, I've made you read a lot. Do you want to continue, or should I get somebody else here?
I'm happy to continue. I'm on
Go for it. Go for Rav Safra to Abaye here. So.
All right. Amar, right, yeah. Amar le Rav Safra Abaye. Michdi Rav kaman amra lishmate Rabbi Yehuda. De Amar min b'mino lo batel. My area kinatan tam. Afilu hi lo natan tam nami. Amar le hakabamaya.
Stop at ki lo natan tam nami. So.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Rav Safra said to Abaye. Now, since Rav said that, who's Rav in accordance with? Well, Rabbi Yehuda, who said min b'mino lo batel. A type in the same type does not get nullified. Why does it specify when it imparted flavor, which is like the whole conversation we've been having all along here? Even when it doesn't impart flavor, it should also forbid, meaning that min b'mino shouldn't have anything to do with flavor, right? Except we're talking about maybe it does, and that's why we're confused.
Yeah, and to put it a little in Rabbi Yehuda's world, where min b'mino lo batil, anything that's not batil in any amount, kol shehu, right, in any amount, right, tam isn't shayach. Right? There's no right. Connect. Tom is out of the conversation. So why does Rav bring up Tom? Which, by the way, also the Mishnah brings up Tom. He's got that problem. He's got to deal with the Mishnah as well. So Rav is being honest to the Mishnah. And so that's the question of, well, why do I care? It should be the first piece infects the second piece. Kol shehu min b'mino, right? It makes it a nevela, and then it's min b'mino lo batel, that's the end of the story. So, okay, so let's read Abaye's answer to Rav Safra.
Great. Amarle, hacha b'maya skinan, b'shekadam b'salako. I guess we'll stop there because then we have a whole other.
Yeah.
So Abai says to Rav Safra, what are we dealing with here? And what we're dealing with here is a case in which he first removed it. Meaning, I guess this is where the whole idea of the nevela piece coming out throughout our discussion has come from. Is that we're dealing with a case in which the piece of nevela was removed from the pot. So we're not concerned with accidentally eating the nevela itself. We're concerned with taste.
Great. So we're concerned with
pieces like taste, but whatever.
So, but by the way, for Rashi, this actually works very nicely in the sense that since the two things were interacting together first before everything else was in there, you got rid of the nevela first, but the flavor is important as to whether or not Hanan happened. That second piece became a nevela itself, all right? To Tosfot, it's a little bit harder, and they have to get into, we may not get into it, so I'm just going to say it outside, the acrobatics of, even though Min b'mino b'chol shehu is a problem, it doesn't make something nevela. This is a little similar, but it doesn't make something nevela to infect other things unless it's with tam, right? B'netinat tam of 1 in 60. So Tosfot's case, in one hand, I think is a little bit more usual a case, but at the same time, Rashi actually, I think, in some ways fits the Gemara flow better here once we have this answer. So anybody, was that Isaac, were you shaking your head there, or was that just a stretch? Okay. Lisa, please, go ahead.
Can you repeat those two again?
Yeah, so Rashi, right, remember, because Rashi had a separate interaction between the first two pieces, right, that you had the two pieces cooked together, the nevela and the first heter, and then you threw in all the rest of the pieces. Then you remove the nevela, the original nevela, then you threw in all the rest of the pieces. Then we have to ask, did the first nevela give enough ta'am to make the first heter piece a nevela? Okay, and that's where netinat ta'am comes in for Rashi. All right, Tosfot has to say that you threw out that first piece fast enough that it didn't give enough time to make it a nevela, I'm gonna start. You have to throw it out, that interaction still happened between the first two pieces, but it hasn't made its way down. You haven't mixed yet to get to the other pieces. So.
If we're in the business of assessing which of these stories is a more realistic story, I'm going to toss in my hat for Rashi. I've never cooked anything where there was a pile of pieces and two of them were poking out above the rotev. I feel like that is a very rare corner situation that feels motivated, more motivated by the text than by real life. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's my assessment. Whereas in Rashi's scenario, I can actually think of a very realistic situation that parallels it, which is not in the case of pieces of meat, but say when I'm making pretty much anything, I usually stir fry the onions first. So say there was a truma onion mixed in with my nevela onions, a truma onion mixed in with my heter onions. Suddenly all of those other onions now have become truma, kivyachol, before I've poured everything else in. So I actually think you can come up with a realistic scenario that actually happens the way people cook in Rashi's shita, whereas the Tosfos seem entirely, in my mind, sort of constructed to match the words on the page.
So Shani, I'm going to push back, and then I'm going to say we have to run. We're running out of time, so I'm going to get the last word on that piece. But there have been plenty of times where I cook, and I'm not talking about dropping something in non-kosher, but I drop something in accidentally to a thing, and I'm like, oh, and I grab it and I just throw it out, and I'm like, oh, it only touched, and I didn't want onion in that thing. It only touched that thing, that one piece. All right, that one piece is all I care about. I see the Tosfot as a realistic thing too, in that sense. But I'm going to actually jump in here, and I know this is still pretty confusing, and I think it should be, right? The whole thing is that the shitot that both Rashi and Tosfot have to come up with are a little bit difficult because this is actually a very confusing sugya. But I want to get to Rava's answer because there's an incredibly important halachic significance to it. And I'm just going to read that. Miriam, I hope you don't mind if that's okay.
Go for it, please. Yeah.
And so Rava, who seems to be in this conversation as well, right? Not surprising, Rava and Abaye. Rava Amar, some at the very bottom of Kuf Amud Aleph, and I'm flipping to Kuf Amud Bet. Afilu tema lo kadam uslako. No, it doesn't. You don't have to have like gotten the thing out early, just grabbed it, thrown out the nevela piece. We're not talking about that case. Why? Havi min umino udavar acher. We're actually dealing with. Remember the whole case was there's rotev, there's piece chatichot. And so we have a min b'mino and we have a min b'she'eno mino case, essentially, right? There's a third substance in there. There's nevela, hatichot that are ksherot, and we have rotev, which is kasher, of course. And so that's a whole nother mathematics, a whole nother, shall we say, kind of force marshaling that's going to go here. All right. V'chol min umino dvar acher. How do we calculate that case? Slaket mino. Here it doesn't mean remove the mino, but it means like mentally calculate as if the mino is not there. Kimisheno, as if it doesn't exist. V'she'emino rabba alav umevatlo. And the thing that's not mino, here it's the lach substance, the rotev. So you have the nevela in the rotev. If there's enough rotev to be 60-1 against it, then you have mino. It can be batel in 60-1. And that's where tam is important in this case. And what Rav was talking about, why is it netinat tam, is only if it's enough netinat tam to infect the rotev at 60-1 to the nevela, do we then worry about the min b'mino case with everything else? Okay. And so this is a general principle of when we have min b'mino udvar acher, I'm going to translate that as min b'mino ve'eno mino, that the mino becomes neutral essentially, and it's a fight between the min and enosh mino as to whether or not they're 60-1 in that pot, and that's an important halacha. And we have 5 minutes left. And so in that 5 minutes, I would like to actually, let me just pause, see if there's questions. I did that very quickly, but I'm sure everyone's seen it already. And I did it without the Rashi. So, but I want to see Rabbeinu Ephraim, because he has an interesting shita on Hanan, Chatichana Sed Nevela, that I want to see before we, any final question? Yeah, Asher? Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm in the Tosfot, B'shekadam uslako, and if you go to the third line in the middle on the daf, and I'm not sure where in the document, I'll take a quick look. Where did I put the Tosfot? It's also in the third line in the middle. V'Rabbeinu Ephraim Hayomer. Okay, and I'll read it just for sake of time because we have 4 minutes. All right. Rabbeinu Ephraim Hayomer mitoch kach de'afilu ki natna batam ein heter nase nevela. Right. He says that even if it gave flavor, it doesn't. The chaticha doesn't become an nevela. Le'asor kol acherot in its ability to make everything else asor. Why? Kevan shehi atzma lo nesra ela edei kol shehu. Right, because he's talking about the case here where you only had it absorbed a little bit of flavor, but not enough to actually be tam from the nevela. All right, and it only got kol shehu. All right. Excuse me. Did I? Excuse me. I dropped a line. I'm going to try that again. Yeah. Rabbeinu Ephraim Hayomer mitoch kach de'afilu ki natna batam eina heter nase nevela. It doesn't become a nevela in that you need 60-1 against the chaticha. He says only against what it absorbed. Hilkach l'Rav d'amar hacha d'min b'mino lo batel. So according to Rav, who says min b'mino is no batel, k'shechatichat eter kablatam mina nevela chashiva yisur ki'iluhu be'ayin ve'oseret kol chatichot b'mashu. Only if it received enough flavor from that nevela that it's less than 60-1, all right, then we assume that essentially even though you remove the nevela as if it's still there, and the entire chaticha has enough power of this former heter, has enough power to be oser b'mashu, to make everything else asur without worrying about what the ratio is. Aval, ki lo natna nevela tamba, but if it didn't have enough, if the nevela just touched it, but it didn't give it so much flavor to make it netinat tam, all right. Lo hayta oseret hachatichot mishemina right? It doesn't oser all the rest of the chatichot just because it's min b'mino. Sharei en tzarich levatel ela isur levad. All you have to then do is to negate the flavor that the isur gave, the kol shehu. Ve'kevan shelo natan b'chaticha have isur keman delete. And since it didn't give enough time, it's as if the isur doesn't exist. Delo have ki'iluhu ba'ayin. It's not as if you can see it still. Velo asar ela chaticha rishona. It only made the first chaticha asur she'ena heter naseh isur. Lo asar sha'ar chatichot. All right. So the heter doesn't become a full isur in that it can forbid all the other things. V'davka gabe tipat, and this is the important thing. Like underline this. V'davka gabe tipat chalav arminan. Lakama berakol basar dechaticha smat nasa nevela. And this is the thing of Rabbeinu Ephraim. He says only in a basar bechalav mixture do we ever talk about a chaticha itself becomes a nevela. And I've got 1 minute, so I'm going to say it outside. He says because the mixture itself is what makes two heter things asur in basar b'chalav, then that thing itself becomes the entire thing. No matter how much chalav dropped on this piece of meat, the whole thing becomes an isur mixture. It becomes nasen nevela. But in the case where we're not talking about basar b'chalav, we're talking about just tarovot mixtures of an isur with a heter, that Hanan does not actually apply. He actually kind of writes an okimta into Rav here so much so that he kind of undoes his entire shita to some extent. And Rabbeinu Ephraim is going to become a very important voice in this whole thing of does Hanan only apply in basar b'chalav or does it apply in all cases? And I will end there. Any questions? Any thoughts? You have, like 30 seconds. So.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Shani, thank you. Joel, thank you. I want to thank from 2 weeks ago, Joel, Noam as well, and our Magid Shiur this year for this material. I'll be participating, our Magid Shiur, Rabbi Danzig. We're starting to plunge in, getting a taste of this. And so the notion of when is their taste and how impactful is that taste, these are going to be the major questions. And it's not a matter, we change the situations and we create the situations so we can create halacha and we can test principles. So at this point, the learning is not there to really to decide individual cases, I would say, as much as to give us the groundwork in which we can start creating halachic principles. And that's what we're going to be involved in. When we get back August 31st, we'll have 3 more sessions of Dapim in Hullin. I don't know if we're doing any Avodah Zarah, which are important. I have to look again, really important items. Nachum sent out to you all also other Dapim, in case you're interested. The more you do, the better off you are. Just to go through Pshat and the Dapim that we're not getting to will be helpful. I have basically the number of people I want to share, but there's always room for a couple of good people. So if you have someone or someone could be a good chavruta for you, recommend them to us, and we'll see if that works out. I think we're ready for an extraordinarily involving and deep learning sessions of really understanding the halachic process, point by point, larger points, continents by continents, and so that's exciting. We'll send out some more material to you. Again, yesh koach to the shir givers tonight, and I hope you all stay safe. If there's issues or something you want to bring, there's always issues. If something you want to bring up, you can always bring up. Please, technically on the shir, please write with Nachum. Anything else, you can certainly write me as well, and always available. And really good luck.